Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is simply go to the outliner and click on the figure and drag it and drop it onto the armature and then do with automatic weights. Next, go ahead and open up the armature, click on pose over here to switch to pose mode. Go ahead and click on this bone, press the R key to ensure that the automatic weight system did work. Right click to cancel. Go ahead and now click on the figure, go to the modifiers tab over here. Make sure that these two options are on and make sure that the armature modifier is above the subdivision surface modifier. Now what we want to do is go ahead and do file and then do save. Remember, this is rigging lesson 02 a.blend. Now the next thing that we need to do here is actually check to make sure that the bone rolls are correct for all the bones in our rig. Now we only have to check the bones that are in the center and on the left side, because we can simply just select them by suffix and press the G key in the enter key to make sure with the x-axis mirror all the bones get aligned correctly on the right side. So let's actually go ahead and zoom in, do shift middle mouse button over here and start with the bones on the feet. Go ahead and click on this bone over here. Now I'm going to do the middle mouse button over here to rotate. So what we want to do again is that our dominant rotation axis is going to be around the x-axis, because bones can only rotate on their heads, which is their default behavior. And the major movement is going to be distinguished by where the z-axis is pointing on the tail, and the minor movement is going to be its opposite direction. So over here, if we press the R key and press the X key 2 times, here we are rotating around the x-axis on the head of this bone. And where the z-axis is pointing, this is the major movement and this is the minor movement. Right click to cancel. So this is what we're going to be doing when we're looking at all the bones on our rig. So looking at this bone, what we want to do is actually press the 3 key, shift middle mouse button over here, and switch to edit mode. Go ahead and open up the transforms, and we want to take a look at the bone rolls. Now, as I've said, that what we want to do is basically point the z-axis when it comes to the toe bone, making sure that it points up. So what we can do is simply just hover our mouse over the z over here, do Control C, and then hover it over here, do Control V, and over here you'll see that when we type in 0, if I do the middle mouse button, the z-axis is pointing up. And if we want to point the z-axis down, we can just do 180 and enter. Okay, so we want the z-axis to point up. You can type in 0 and enter. Now we didn't have to do this, right? We didn't have to copy the z onto the z of the tail. If you click on the tail over here, press the 3 key and actually move this down just a little bit, you'll notice that in order to point now the z up, we have to type in 180 rather than 0, right? So if you type in 0, now the z is pointing down. Okay, so over here, if we type in 180, it'll point up, but it's not perfectly horizontal, and that's okay. This is because this is an organic figure. It's not a machine, right? So if you look at this, if you switch to pose mode, you'll notice that even in pose mode, it's still going to behave correctly. Even if it's horizontally off, where the tail and the head are not aligned horizontally, it's still going to work. If you press the R key, press the X key 2 times, see, it still works. So anyways, the point here is that to keep things simple, what we can do is simply just hover our mouse again, do Control C, over here do Control V, and just type in 0, right? So don't get caught up in what the value has to be over here on the roll. All that matters is where visually is the z pointing. Now the other thing that I do want to point this out over here is that if we go to pose mode, press the R key, press the X key 2 times, we're rotating around the x-axis, right? Now of course, if we press the 3 key, because this is based on the view, if we just press the R key, we're actually still rotating around the x-axis, but it is not exclusively rotating on the local x-axis that belongs to the head of this bone. It's just based on the view. But because the way the bones are aligned, it still works. So we can use this concept to quickly check these bones, how they're rotating, because they're aligned this way. Okay, right click to cancel. So this bone is now set up correctly. Now let's take a look at this bone over here. So go ahead and click this and make sure over here you're clicking on foot.L. It will be highlighted in blue. So if we do the middle mouse button, we can see that the Z is pointing up. Now let's go ahead and check the bone roll, what it says. Over here it says 180. So what we want to do is point the Z axis down. Okay, because now again, it's not like if you break this rule, it's not going to make your rig work. It's just a self-discipline that we're implementing when we're designing this rig. So here in pose mode, if we press the R key to rotate, right? So here is the major movement and this is the minor. But because the Z needs to point down for major, we're going to have to switch to bone roll. Right click to cancel. So here we're just going to switch to edit mode and type in a 0 over here. And now the Z is pointing down. So here we'll just switch to pose mode, press the R key, now the Z points down and minor is its opposite. Right, and of course we know that it's rotating on its head around the x-axis because of the way the bone is aligned. So it's not like we have to do this, press the R key, press the X key 2 times to ensure that it works. Right, it's just logic. We know that it's going to work. Okay. Okay, so now let's take a look at this one over here. Now I'm going to switch to edit mode first over here. Press the 1 key to show you something over here. Actually, let's go ahead and save this file right now. Now, you'll notice over here that the bone roll over here for me is showing negative 1.24. The reason this is happening is because when we had positioned this bone vertically, we had actually nudged it to the right. So here the bone roll is going to change because it needs to keep the Z axis pointing in the same direction. Okay, this is what it is. So what this means is if you press the 1 key over here and take a look at this bone, see how this bone from the front view is aligned nicely, and if we press the 3 key, it's aligned nicely. So if you come over here and type in 0, you'll notice that if I do the A key to deselect, it's not aligned nicely, but it's not going to break this bone rig system on the leg just because it's not at that exact alignment, right? Because it's so minor. So if you press the 1 key, you'll see that over here it's not aligned, right? So over here, if we like do this, you'll notice that it's going back to the same, right? We can type in what was it, minus 1.24, enter. Now you'll see that it's aligned correctly. That's all this means. Okay, anyways, I'm going to reload this file. Okay, so this bone where it says this number is actually correct. Now what do we need to understand about this bone over here? All we need to make sure is that the Z is pointing back over here because this is going to be the major movement. So if we switch to pose mode and press the R key, press the X key 2 times, we know that this is going to be rotating around the x-axis. Now of course the leg is not going to break on the shin like this, right? This is the Z is pointing back is because it's really based on this bone over here. If you press the R key, press the F key 2 times, this is how the knee bends. So this bone is going to follow what this bone does. So here you can see that the Z is pointing back. So this is correct. Over here, if we click this, you can see that the Z is pointing back. If you press the 3 key to look at this, press the R key, here we're bending on the knee, right? So the Z is pointing back. And if we take a look at its bone roll, you'll notice that again, it's negative 1.24, okay? Now you'll notice that if we switch to this bone over here, it'll be 0. Now why is this 0? Now the reason for this is because when we place this bone, we simply just went down. We never nudged it to the left or the right from the front view as we had done this bone, okay? So this bone is going to be correct too. So here it's stating it's 0, and if we do the middle mouse button over here, we can see that the Z is pointing backwards, and if we click on this bound, the Z is pointing backwards. So if we switch to pose mode, press the R key, press the X key 2 times, this is the major movement, this is the minor, and it's rotating around the x-axis. Of course, when you click on this, press the R key, press the X key 2 times, it's going to do the same thing, right? But you're not going to be messing with this bone anyways. It's just there to help the rotation concept for this joint. So if you press the R key, press the Y key 2 times, you'll notice that it'll give us the ability to make this movement like this. So if we go back over here, you'll see the reason behind why we have split this. If we press the R key, press the Y key 2 times, it'll give us the ability to do this sort of movement on the bottom of the shin. Okay, so this is how these bones are going to be set up. Okay, now let's go ahead and save this file over here. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the bones in the center. First, let's talk about this bone. So this is a fixed bone. The only reason this bone is here is really to help you to capture the vertices that are in this area, so we don't have to waste our time on the figure if I click it in Wave Paint, right? We're making Blender do all this work. This is the purpose of this bone. So if we take a look at the bone roll for this bone, here it's set on -38, and that's fine. This bone is never going to be manipulated in any way. It's just a child of the hip bone. So wherever the hip bone goes, these bones will follow. So we are not going to be touching the bone rolls for this. Okay, so we're going to leave that be. Now let's go ahead and click on this hip bone over here, press the 3 key to take a look at this. Now over here, it'll state a 0. This is correct, right? And the Z is going to point to the left because this is going to be the major movement. Now let's go ahead and click on pose. Now you'll notice that when we press the R key from the right view and move this, the entire figure is going to move. So here is going to be the major movement and the minor movement, right? I'm going to zoom out. Now, right now, because this is acting like the root bone, when you press the R key, this is basically the root or the parent of all the bones. So this is why the entire figure is going to move. Okay, so we're going to leave it like this. It's only with the non-deformed bones that we can stop the figure from doing this. Okay, so right click to cancel. So remember, the Z is going to be pointing to the left. Now, of course, it's going to be the same thing for this bone. The Z is pointing to the left. If you press the R key on this, this is the major movement, this is the minor movement. Okay, and of course, if I do the middle mouse button, press the R key, press the X key 2 times, this is rotating around the x-axis. Now, we already know, I'm going to go to edit mode to show you that this, of course, is going to be a bone roll of 0. If we check on this bone, which is basically going to be doing the same thing as this one, this, of course, is going to be 0. So here I'm just going to show you that on this bone, and this, which is the chest dot lower, chest dot upper, it's 0, the neck is 0, and the head is 0. Okay, so now if we switch to pose mode and we click over here, because we've already checked this bone, you can see that the Z-axis is pointing to the left. If we press the 3 key, this is correct. Press the R key, you can see that this is the major movement and this is the minor movement, right? Now let's go ahead and click on this bone. The Z-axis is pointing to the left. Press the R key, major movement and minor movement. Now this bone is actually not going to be used that much because the upper chest is not actually going to rotate like this. That would not be possible, but we're going to use it just to rotate a little bit like this when we do the non-deformed bones. Anyway, now if we click on the neck, you'll see that it's going to do the same thing. Here the Z is pointing towards the major movement. Press the R key, major and minor, and if we click on the head, the Z is pointing to the left. Press the R key, major and minor, right? And of course, all these bones are going to be rotating around the x-axis, right? Press the R key, press the X key 2 times, rotating around the x-axis. Press the R key, press the X key 2 times, rotating around the x-axis. Press the R key, press the X key 2 times, rotating around the x-axis. Press the 3 key. Now let's take a look at this jawbone. Now over here, you'll see that the Z is pointing down. This is correct. So if we press the R key to rotate, which is rotating around the x-axis, This is the major movement and this is the minor. Now over here, if we look at the tongue bones, which are going to be exactly the same. Remember, we can see the axis for this bone through this bone. So Z is pointing down and Z is pointing down. Press the R key. You can notice that this is the major, this is the minor, major, minor, and major, minor. Now let's take a look at the bone rolls. So for the jawbone, you'll notice that it's 0. And of course this is going to be 0, this is going to be 0, and this is going to be 0. Okay? Now let's take a look at the eye. Now for the eyes, we want the z-axis to point up. Now you'll notice in my case it's saying 180. Okay, so if we to ensure that it points up, here I can just type in 0, but to ensure that it does this, right, we're going to have to hover our mouse over here, do Control C, hover it down here, do Control V, and then type in 0. Now the Z is going to be pointing up. This is what we want. Go ahead and switch to pose mode, press the 3 key and press the R key. Okay, so this is the major and this is the minor, and that's it. Okay, so let's go ahead and save what we've done so far. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the shoulder. Now over here, if we press the 1 key, you can see that the Z is pointing up. This is correct. So if we press the R key, the shoulder is going to move up. Remember, when we press the R key from the front view, this is based on the view. But if we press the R key, press the X key 2 times, this is now along the local x-axis. If I do the middle mouse button to show you, if you press the R key, this is just based on the view. Okay, if you press the R key, press the X key 2 times, we're rotating around the x-axis. Now notice that how the Z is pointing up, this is the major and this is the minor. So this bone is actually correct. Now if we go over here in edit mode, you can see that the bone roll is 0, right? And the Z is pointing up. And if we press the 3 key, you can see over here, it's going to show up as black. Here, the Z is pointing up. So this bone is correct. Now, just like that fixed bone for the hip, if we click on this bone, we're not going to touch this bone. Bone is going to be used along with the non-deformed bones. You can see that the Z is pointing up. Notice that the roll is a bit different. If we press the 3 key, go over here to close in on it, you can see that how the Z is on this bone over here. Okay, so over here, if we switch to pose mode and press the R key, this is rotating around the x-axis, right? Notice that if we click on this, press the R key to move this up, notice that this area is not moving. So if we do this, we can get much more realistic movements, okay? That's what that's for. Anyways, I'm going to do Alt-R to reset everything. So here, just press on the A key and do Alt-R to reset all the rotations. So all of these bones over here are going to be correct. So we're going to go ahead and now park this like this. We're going to talk about the bone rolls for the arms. Okay, so here I've just saved this file. I'm just going to save it again, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Thank you.